We don't normally see major deals on draft day, but this 2025 NHL draft feels different. And not only does it feel different, we've also got confirmation that the San Jose Sharks, who currently have the second overall pick, are potentially looking at a trade up to first overall. So today I wanted to break down all the trade rumors surrounding this 2025 NHL draft, the San Jose Sharks' second overall pick that could potentially become number one, and what it might take to do it. So make sure you guys watch till the end as we go through all the draft content here today, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more draft content just like this as we go through the next few weeks leading up to the NHL draft. Now, all this chatter about the first overall pick potentially getting traded started out with this tweet from NHL Rumor Reports from David Pagnotta saying that according to his sources, the Sharks are looking to trade up from pick number 2 to pick number 1 to select defenseman Matthew Schaefer. Now, in terms of the Sharks wanting Matthew Schaefer in the end, that is no surprise whatsoever, considering out of all the top prospects in this draft class, I think he does fit them the best. Even though I think they could use still another top 6 centerman, I think their need for another bona fide top 4 defenseman, especially a bona fide top pair one like Matthew Schaefer, is a growing need for them. And yes, Sam Dickinson has absolutely been dominant, especially this year in the OHL, but I think having another piece of the puzzle on the defense like a Schaefer really boosts that Sharks core, and I think pretty much perfects it going forward. Then they can start to take those bigger next steps with a player like Schaefer, especially added on that defense that has so much talent all around. As a younger defenseman, especially as a September birth date, he had a brilliant start to this season. Unfortunately, got injured to the World Juniors, but the games he played in both the OHL and the World Juniors level were exceptional and showed what he was really made of. In the past, I've compared him to a defenseman like Roman Josi, where the transition ability is pristine, the confidence with the puck is high end, and even if he's 75% of a Roman Josi, the Sharks are extremely happy to get this type of player. Unfortunately for the Sharks, even though they were the worst team in the league and had the best odds for first overall, the New York Islanders rose 9 spots to get up to that number 1 position and basically take most of the hopes for the Sharks in taking Schaefer completely away. Still, in most mocks, Michael Misa, who is also an exceptional player, to me the best prospect in this draft, is not a bad pick at number 2, but in terms of team need, losing Schaefer certainly hurts. For the Sharks, still getting a second line center like Michael Misa would be unbelievable. I mean, a second line center would be cutting it short. Michael Misa could absolutely be a 1C if he needed to, but as a second line center would be unbelievable. But Matthew Schaefer, I think, just fits such a need for the Sharks team in terms of pure pace, pure upside that they don't quite have on the defense. Cagnoni, Sam Dickinson, they're both excellent defensemen, but Matthew Schaefer could be even better than that. Which is why when we started seeing the rumors about the Sharks potentially trading up from number 2 to number 1, it made complete sense. I mean, if any team's going to rise up in this draft to try to get a Matthew Schaefer type, it is the San Jose Sharks. To me, it was the best fit all along, and unfortunately, unless they trade for it, likely isn't going to be the case. With the Islanders, I would say 95% chance right now that they would end up selecting Matthew Schaefer in the end, which I think for them can still be a pretty excellent pick. In a lot of ways, might be the best pick for them. But for a Sharks team that really wants to take that next step, really wants to complete that rebuild, trading up to number 1 would certainly do that. And I think getting Matthew Schaefer would be perfect for them. But of course, with any draft trade, especially moving up in this draft, moving up to a first overall position, it's going to cost a pretty penny. For a team like the Islanders, they have all of the leverage right now, and no matter what situation they do not have to trade down whatsoever. I mean, in this case, it makes it interesting that this class is, I think, still so balanced at the very top between Matthew Schaefer and Michael Misa, because I think that means that a team like the Islanders would be pretty fine and pretty content, I think, to keep that first overall pick, or if the trade wows them, go down to that second overall position, because a player like Michael Misa is pretty sick to have, and hey, maybe at that spot, they're more willing to maybe take the Long Island born kid and James Hagens and maybe have that be the route they take. So a lot of different ways that the Islanders especially could go about this, but getting an offer from the Sharks I think is pretty likely here. But that's just the question though. If the Sharks end up trading that first overall position, what would it even take to do it? I mean, this is almost an unprecedented type of action to see the first overall pick traded or traded down in any capacity. Even if it is from number 1 and number 2, it would still be pretty shocking, and especially for the Sharks, I think it would cost a lot. Now, for me personally, if I was in charge of San Jose, even though I think the fit is perfect for Schaefer, I think there is the chance that it's going to cost a little bit too much more than it is actually worth. I mean, there is some pretty great defensemen in next year's draft, specifically a player like Keaton Verhoff, I think would be absolutely perfect for that Sharks defensive core. So if you're in a similar position next season, could potentially go for a defenseman, then I don't think it's an absolute need. But for San Jose, it might be in a position where they adore a player like Schaefer and try to just go for it, try to make it happen. But if it is actually going to happen, happen, I think it's going to surprise a lot of people by the actual value that goes back. Even though you're only rising up one spot, number one is a valuable pick to have, and the Sharks would have to give up a lot. Now, I've seen the tweet floated around and dunked on a ton with my good friend Mike, talking about a potential mock trade, saying second overall Dickinson, Chernyshov, 2025 Dallas is first, and 2026 Edmonton first. That's not happening whatsoever, obviously, but I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people are still kind of underestimating how much the Islanders would really ask for. But I do think, in all honesty, it kind of depends on what they want going forward. Do they want to go after defensemen? Do they want to go after forward? If the Islanders are content with some of the players in the Sharks pool already, then I could see a situation where a trade does happen. In all honesty, considering the Sharks and their weakness on the defense, their left side has a few pretty great trade chips. Now, I think Sam Dickinson is completely off the table. There is absolutely no chance the Sharks would ever have him in that type of deal. Considering, I mean, their lefty is a bit of weakness. Why would you trade Sam Dickinson to make it more of a weakness? Even though Matthew Schaefer, I think, is the better player, I don't think it's by this absolute landslide type of mark. So I think for them, especially keeping Dickinson, if they're going to bring on Matthew Schaefer, that's a must. Now, going on to the trade chips the San Jose Sharks could potentially work with, starting with the forward group, I don't think there's many that are current NHLers that the Sharks would want to give up the Islanders also want. I mean, you got players like William Eklund that I'm sure the Islanders would love to have, but I don't think are really touchable at this stage in their careers. But guys that I think could potentially be in play, first is Colin Graff, and I think he's a pretty easy one. Something that's split between the NHL and the AHL level, but I still think has pretty good offensive potential. I don't see as much more than just a solid third liner, but the Islanders do want to get a forward. I think Graff would be one of the more likely guys to go. You also got Kasper Halttunen as a maybe, former early second rounder in the 2023 draft, big forward, uses that goal scoring in a major way, especially on the power play. Massive last couple playoffs for London, especially. He's something that I think could be really fascinating in the Islanders core that already has a couple interesting snipers like Cole Eisman, for example. Halttunen would certainly bring a big body to that group and could be something that's pretty enticing. On the defensive side, to me, though, there are so many more weapons here to choose from. The big NHLer that I think the Islanders would especially want to go after is, again, Mario Ferraro, who has carved out a neat career for himself. Again, nothing that I think is very extraordinary. I don't think he would be better than maybe just a fourth defenseman for them, but as somebody that can play a lot of roles, be very versatile, I think the Islanders could gravitate towards a defenseman like that. Then on some of the more prospect side of things, you got Shahir McMadulan, who was just recently re-signed by San Jose. I'm not a big fan of him in terms of his decision making, but the big size, big skating ability, that's something the Islanders might want to take on as an interesting project. You also got Jake Furlong, who I want to put in here as maybe a depth option to include in a trade. If it's close, maybe a player like Furlong could get it over the door. Nothing crazy as a former 5th overall pick. He hasn't had the greatest time in the AHL so far, but pretty good QMJHLer and still has a lot of time to grow. And of course, the big one in Luca Cagnoni. And to me, if you're trading a player like that, it might really be him and that may be it to get that first overall position. Cagnoni has become a pretty brilliant prospect as a former 4th rounder. Somebody that does have really small size, but is super creative. The goal scoring, as you can see, a major component this last year in the AHL. 16 goals, 52 points in his first AHL season. So pretty great numbers there. I would be a little bit hesitant to see the Islanders actually go for a player like Cagnoni in a deal, just because I think that size for them might be a bit of a question mark. But hey, they've gone after players like Scott Perunovich recently, who aren't also the biggest players in the world, so maybe it's a possibility. As for the first trade, this is more of an NHL player-based deal, especially if the Islanders want to go after a player like Mario Ferraro. This is what I kind of see it looking like. To the San Jose Sharks, that first overall pick, which will be selected as Matthew Schaefer by the San Jose Sharks. To the Islanders, second overall, and Michael Misa. You also get Mario Ferraro, of course, there as the lefty. Then is wing Kasper Halttunen. And I think for the Islanders, especially if they're going to go for Ferraro, who is a little bit more of a veteran established player, I think they'd want to get a bigger time forward to add on to the deal. Halttunen as this big power forward, I think could be especially fascinating by the Islanders. I think they'd be entranced by him, and a 2025 second round pick. For me, for the Sharks especially, if you really crave Matthew Schaefer that much, you aren't giving up a massive left D prospect. I don't think it's necessarily a must to give up a Cagnoni, for example, but you give up a Mario Ferraro, which I don't think will be the biggest deal for them. The big one is Kasper Halttunen, though, who I think would be missed in the middle 6, but I think you could replace him potentially with that later first round pick if they really want to, especially since they would be selecting a defenseman. I think there's guys around that range like Shane Van Sett Sagi, for example, who could fill a pretty similar role. Maybe not as good of a power play sniper, but similar trajections. So for the Sharks, even though I don't think it would be the greatest thing in the world to give up those type of prospects, you do need to give up something to actually make it happen. Plus, I could maybe see it being upgraded to that late first rounder if they really need it to. The Sharks second rounder is, of course, basically a late first round pick, so it's not that big of a deal. But I think for the Sharks overall, you're not giving up anything too crazy. Halttunen would be a loss, but you got to give someone to get something, and especially for the Sharks, if they really want Schaefer, I could see this being the pretty realistic deal. The only thing is maybe the Islanders want to go a little bit younger, which leads us on to mock trade number 2. If the Islanders are hell-bent on getting one of the Sharks' lefty prospects, I think ultimately it would end up being Luca Cagnoni. Maybe they want Shakir Mukhamadullin, but I think they'd want to go for somebody a little bit younger than him, and Cagnoni, of course, certainly fits that bill. If the Islanders are fine going for a smaller defenseman, then Cagnoni, I think, would check every box for what they need. The intensity, the skill set, especially from the point, is incredible to watch and would be electrifying on the Islanders' defense. Not Matthew Schaefer levels, but getting Cagnoni and then getting a Michael Meese, that second overall pick, is not a bad draft whatsoever. Plus, on top of that, I think it would be a 2025 fifth round pick, maybe a little bit more, maybe more depth picks on top of things, but I think Cagnoni would ultimately be the big prize here for the Islanders. I can see a situation where you don't want to trade Luca Cagnoni, and I could absolutely see that, but for the Sharks, you're getting Matthew Schaefer, you're getting Sam Dickinson. How many power play minutes are going to be afforded to a player like Luca Cagnoni, who I think would use them and really need them to thrive at the NHL level? That to me is the big question, and I think at that point, if you're drafting a Schaefer, if you're and also have Sam Dickinson in your back pocket, I think that makes Luca Cagnoni a lot more expendable, and I think a lot more valuable for the Islanders, in all honesty. I was debating whether to make a third mock trade where it's just a ton of picks, a ton of prospects like Graf, Mukhamadullin, Furlong, like second rounder, third rounder, fifth rounder, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think there's any situation where the Islanders want to trade back to second overall and just get a ton of mid. I don't think that's really something that they're really aspiring to do. I think they want to get more quality in that pool. Maybe if it's just a bunch of picks, they could maybe do something like that, but I don't think that's very realistic. I think for the Islanders, they want to get a top prospect. They want to get somebody they can really depend upon in the future. Either Halttunen or a player like Luca Cagnoni, I think is where it starts, but I think that's where it ends. I don't think it's going to be too much more than that in either of these type of deals, but I think, again, Halttunen and Cagnoni, those are the two guys the Islanders would really want to get if a trade were to happen. Now, of course, there's a possibility the Sharks do not want to do any of that, and the asking price might be too high, but again, for me, I think especially in both of these deals, you're able to recoup some of the value somewhere else. In giving up a Luca Cagnoni, you get a Matthew Schaefer, who I think is just a bona fide upgrade in every single way, and again, you want a much power play ability, much offensive zone time for a player like Cagnoni anyways. In a case like Kasper Halttunen, although I like him as a prospect, I don't think he's this undeniable force. I think there are still some pretty big issues with the skating speed, with some of the scanning ability. It's just the goal scoring and power play ability is so good that he's been able to make it up. And especially looking towards the Sharks' last pick in the first round, I mean, if you're trading a player like Kasper Halttunen, we mentioned him already, but Shane Van Sage, I think would fit pretty well. Milton Gastreen, I think, could also similarly project to Halttunen. Heck, even a player like Malcolm Spence, if you want to go for just a bona fide bottom six player for the future, there's a lot of projectability that I think could be around that range for San Jose at 32. So I don't think it's something that you need to stress about too much if you're the Sharks. And here's the case as well, the Islanders might want more than this, and that's honestly completely justified. They have all of the momentum, all of it on their side, and they don't have to do anything. If they want to select Matthew Schaefer, there's nothing stopping them. And for San Jose, it will be interesting to see how the situation forms itself, because you got a few weeks to go. If you want to trade up to first overall, it'll cost you a little bit, but maybe not as much as some people think. Again, I don't think Sam Dickinson's going to be part of any deal here, but still, it will be a little bit costly, I think, to their depth in the prospect pool. But getting a player like Matthew Schaefer, I think could be worth it. But really, at this stage in the rebuild, this is what I want to see the Sharks doing. I want to see them be aggressive. I want to see them leverage that prospect pool and really put it in and maximize the quality. That's what I think wins you championships, and especially for the Sharks, they're building a great young core here. If they get Michael Meese, I think that's completely fine. I think he'll be exceptional there. But I think Matthew Schaefer could be something else, especially for that Sharks team. So we'll see what ends up happening. I'm glad they have interest in trading up because I think it would be fascinating, but I'm liking what the Sharks are cooking so far. And if they get more aggressive, especially on and off the ice, really boost up that core for next year, I think we could see some major jumps up for them. They have a lot of potential, and the next year, especially this draft especially, is going to be crucial. Heck, maybe even they jump up from the late first rounder they have into the top 15. There's ways to go about it here for San Jose, and a lot of interest, especially on draft day, that we'll need to keep attention on them for. A lot to look out for. But that was just a fun video on what I could potentially see happening if the Sharks were to trade up from 2nd to 1st overall. But let me know in the comments down below, do you see my mock trades as realistic or not? What do you think is a realistic trade for the Sharks to jump up from 2nd to number 1? What do you think it looks like? What do you think the Islanders would want? Let me know your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you share it with all hockey fans you guys know online and click on this card for all my 2025 draft content right in one playlist there. And if you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. Helps videos out a ton. And if you're already watching to this point, I assume you like the videos. Thank you so much for that, by the way. And a ton more to go as we get up to the draft this June. My goodness, it's coming up here soon. We're going to have a lot more to come. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.